Hello, and welcome to Chapter 4, Starting, Steering, and Stopping. In this section, we are going to talk about start the vehicle and accelerate safely, using effective steering techniques, backing a vehicle safely, and more. We're going to start out with our chapter pre-quiz. And the first question is, and remember, as we go along, you can write the answers down, and at the end of the unit, there will be specific directions for answering the questions and a few more questions that will add to additional review to this chapter. So number one, again, after you start the engine, you should A, turn on your low beam headlights, B, check the instrument panel for warning lights, C, drive at a moderate speed for the first few minutes, or D, all of the above. Question number 2, with hand-to-hand steering, the left hand does not touch the steering wheel, the right hand does not touch the steering wheel, the left hand works the left side of the wheel, neither hand crosses an imaginary line running left to right across the middle of the wheel. Question number 3, as a driver, you should look 20 to 30 seconds ahead on an open road, 5 to 7 seconds ahead when driving in the city, at the yellow line in the center of the road, at the middle of the hood. When driving in a parking lot, drivers should use blank acceleration: A, idle, B, light, C, progressive, D, thrust. Question number 5, drivers should use blank braking when slowing the vehicle while preventing abrupt weight transfer: A, controlled squeeze, B, threshold, C, trail, or D, none of the above. And here we're going to move into the chapter information. And it's going to start with specific steps should be used to start a vehicle successfully and safely. Hands and feet should be positioned correctly while driving. Proper steering techniques increases control. Different levels of acceleration and deceleration are used for different situations. Caution should be used when backing a vehicle. And when exiting a vehicle, use the Dutch reach to prevent injury to nearby bicyclists. The first section of this unit is going to be starting the engine. Braking well is one of the most valuable skills a driver can develop. How smooth can you brake? And that is just a little statement that they start with. We're going to move into a video next. Okay. And here you can see their right foot is put on the brake pedal before starting the engine. And this, of course, is a safety feature to make sure that we have good control of the vehicle before we even get it started. This here is a parking brake. Now, again, remember in earlier units, I had talked about not using the parking brake unless you talk to mom and dad first. This is an emergent tool to use in an emergent use and not maybe something that you would use every time you park the car due to its mechanical makeup. So, as you begin and get ready to drive, once you earn your temporary instructional permit, and that's something we'll talk about in later units, using the parking brake would be something you would talk over with mom and dad. Again, if you use it in your day to day or just as needed for an emergency. This next that you're looking at is a gear selector. Now, your car as well may have it in a different location, but before we start the vehicle, we want to make sure that your gear selector or shifter is in park. And I'm going to point right here. We can see that the letter P means park, and our gear selector is located right next to the P, so it's in park. Next, starting the vehicle. Again, I'm just going to kind of quickly go through this. Your vehicle may be different, but you can see here, this one is using an actual key, and this one is what they discuss to be as a remote start. So again, this would be something car specific that the individual working with you to train and driving will discuss when you get to that point. Here is the exhaust, showing you that the car, it's kind of got some black, dirty smoke. Hopefully your car is cleaner running than that, but maybe not. We want to let the engine idle and run slowly in place for 10 to 15 seconds before you start driving. That is called an engine warm up. So we don't want to rev the engine by pushing the accelerator. We just want to turn it on and let it sit for about 10 to 15 seconds before we start driving. This is our instrument panel. And again, the instrument panel in your car may look very similar or very different. We want to make sure that there are no warning lights. And as you can see up here, they're vague in my picture, so I can't see them very well, but there are some warning lights on here. Again, you're going to return to your owner's manual if you are unsure what those lights mean. And if they recommend service, then of course you would service your car before driving. We wanna make sure that the low beam headlights, if they don't come on automatically, that we turn them on, and we drive at a moderate speed for the first few minutes so the engines and fluids can warm up. And again, this is just one version of turning the headlights on. So if your car looks much differently, then you'll wanna become familiar with that. And then we're not going to go into this too much on the difference between electric and hybrid vehicles. That's something, again, that's specific to your vehicle. So that would be something to discuss with the person who is training you on your vehicle. Okay. And again, just a little more information on electric and hybrid vehicles. Next, we're going to talk about steering the vehicle. Improper hand placement on the steering wheel can result in having less control. Why is that an issue? And I'd like you to write down a few answers why not having good hand placement on the steering wheel could be a problem. And then when you turn in your email at the end of the unit, I'll add some discussion points to that. So here we can see how do you steer a vehicle. Turning the top of the steering wheel to the left or counterclockwise steers the vehicle to the left. Turning the top of the steering wheel to the right or clockwise steers the vehicle to the right. And here you can see just a couple of cute pictures. On the left is counterclockwise. So the wheels are pointed to the left, which means the car is going to steer in the direction of the arrow. And again, looking at the picture on the right, we steer clockwise, tires turn to the right, car goes in the direction of the arrow. And here's just a little way to know how to turn which way is left or right. If you do hold up your left hand, it makes an L with your first index finger and your thumb. And if you hold that up, that also points to the direction of which way you want to go. So making the L with your hand is going to combine again, the L for the left in that symbol. However, if you go, as I was leaning into the direction of my discussion, if you go in the way that the L is pointed, that is going to be turning to the right. The L is to focus on, that is your left hand, and you would turn in the way that your hand is positioned. Again, we have discussed this in earlier units, and we want to hold our hand at 9 and 3 or 8 and 4. If you have older drivers who are working with you, they may discuss that 10 and 2 is proper hand placement, and that is changed due to the fact that most cars nowadays have an airbag in the center. And putting our hands up at what would be the 10 and 2 position may increase our risk of safety, as our hands are now at potentially going across the airbags. So we have since moved it to 9 and 3, or if we feel more comfortable holding the lower end of the steering wheel, 8 and 4 as it's positioned here. And it'll take me just a minute to get my cursor, but here's another video. Okay, moving forward, you can see what steering techniques can be used when turning sharply. And this one is talking about hand to hand for right turns or left turns. Now, when I instruct students behind the wheel, I tell them that they can use hand to hand for turning left, as it seems to be a little less quick as hand over hand. Now, I know that's a little different from what the video previously explained. However, the the condition and the way you use your hands is really up to you and what feels more comfortable as far as hand to hand or hand over hand. However, I believe hand over hand is a much quicker response, and so I often teach that for individuals to use more often. Hand to hand steering, we do have both hands always touching the wheel. You're going to move both your hands in the direction you want the turn. In tighter turns, your hands may move as much as 165 degrees up and around the wheel. And again, we're going to talk about hand-to-hand steering. We're going to pretend there's a line running down the directional through the middle of the steering wheel, as you can see in picture number 1. Neither hand will cross that midline in hand-to-hand steering. So you're basically bringing the hand from down position A up to position B, and then you'll re-grab as it's showing here. So you can see hand moving up, hand moving back. And then it will do the same thing for a left turn. You have hand down low, hand up high, and then it turns back again when you're straight. So it depends on which way you're turning, and you can see the arrow. And we'll review one more time. Hand down low, hand moves to midline for turning left, hand returns down low. For turning, or excuse me, this first one was turning to the right, I misspoke. We're going to look at turning left, and it's hand down low, hand up high, hand returns to center. Now, of course, this will happen multiple times in a turn, so your hands will have to move quite a bit when you're turning. Next, we're going to discuss hand over hand. And again, this is the one that I prefer. I think it's a quicker move than hand to hand, but the preference again is yours. The left hand will be between 9 and 10 o'clock. So we're going to slide maybe our hands down a little bit from the 9 to 3. And the right hand may be between 2 and 3. So it might slide up just a little bit. You're going to, here we'll start adding some pictures. So you can see here the steering wheel is turning. And essentially at this point, you're still hanging on with 2 hands. And then your arms will cross. So you can see that this bottom hand has released its grip. It's going to come to the top and it's going to grab and continue to pull to the right. And if we're turning to the left, the top hand we have here will stay, or excuse me, our hand will move up to the top and we'll stay at the top and we'll come back to neutral position. Now, again, this is very tough to explain in a PowerPoint situation. This is something that can be shown once you start behind the wheel. So don't worry if it seems confusing, as when I try to explain it, it comes out confusing every time. So when you get in the car and you start learning how to drive, this will be something that is taught, and it's really easy once you see. And maybe along the way, when we start getting closer to learning our temporary permit, I'll be able to do some videos to show my hand over hand steering. Now here you can see the young lady has her hand upside down inside the steering wheel and only one hand on the wheel. There are a lot of things wrong here. First of all, one hand on the wheel does not give us good control. Second of all, in an accident, holding the steering wheel in this way may actually injure your wrist because we're not able to let go of the steering wheel if our hand is moved quickly in an accident. And two, it's not even going to give her the opportunity to steer quickly and have good control having her hand here. So we always want to grip our hands as it's showing, and I'm going to go back one slide. You can see our hands are on the outside. This is good position with our thumbs up. So Back to the slide. This is a big no-no. We don't want to injure ourselves having our hand over the steer or the airbag. We don't want to have potential for increased accident of hurting ourselves if we do have an accident, and we might not have good control with just using one hand. So again, this is for further practice. We'll talk about this in further uh, slides and further units, but this would allow us to use a paper plate to kind of show us how to steer, but I think we'll wait on this at this point. Moving forward, we want to talk a little bit about searching ahead. So when we get ready to steer and drive down the road, we want to know what we're steering into and what we're working with. So in the city, we will talk about moving 12 to 15 or looking 12 to 15 seconds ahead. And on the open road, we want to look 20 to 30 seconds ahead. And I'm going to move to the next slide here to kind of talk about this. So from where we're looking, if you imagine us at this target point of this mailbox here, we would count out 20 to 30 seconds or way up to that hill to see ahead, and that's how far we want to look. So when we're driving, we don't want to focus really close here. We don't want to focus at a shorter distance on the vehicle. We want to see this vehicle, but our actual focus is way up here to add potential hazards of maybe deer or pedestrians or other cars pulling out of driveways. We also want to look straight ahead as it's going to help us to keep in our lane. If we look straight ahead, our car is going to tend to travel that way because our hands will follow straight ahead, as in our eyes often will follow where our hands will go where our eyes go. Here is looking at some objects we might pass, and we might pass parked vehicles, post or bridge abutments, traffic cones or construction barrels, construction equipment, or many other things. What are some steps you should follow to pass by stationary objects? So here we have cars parked on the left side of the street. And as we're looking at this picture, we're imagining this is our windshield. And so we're looking out to see all of these items. When we pass, we would like to move over just slightly enough to allow this car's door, or potentially this car or this car, for it to open wide open here. So we don't want to be too close. So if this car abruptly opened up while we were driving down the road unexpectedly, we would give it plenty of room for it to open up and maybe something to step out. So we might move over just a little bit to go down the road to increase our safety. And bear with me as I move slide position here. Here is a bridge. Sometimes space is limited on both sides of the vehicle, so we wouldn't maybe stay over here, or we wouldn't move over to the left. We would try to center ourselves up. And this is something you judge by looking ahead. And as you get into the bridge area, you maybe move over to center just a little bit. Next, we're going to talk about steering errors. So as a new driver, sometimes you have difficulty learning steering. It's a difficult thing to learn initially and takes a little bit of work. So when we're working on steering, maybe at intersections or around curves, we might steer too much. Steering it too much in one direction may make it a harder turn. Or not steering enough may not change the direction of the vehicle enough, and we may have difficulty staying on the intended path. And again, this is something that you'll start out in a parking lot learning to do. And so it becomes more familiar as to how do I steer enough? What if I'm not steering it, or if I'm steering too much? So more steering errors can be steering too slowly. Maybe as we're doing a right turn, we're not turning our hands quickly enough, so we might not get the turn as sharp as we want. Or difficulty avoiding objects such as maybe potholes or signs or mailboxes. Or steering too quickly, which can cause a rapid shift in a weight and maybe possible traction loss. So this is why when we first learn how to steer, we should start in parking lots or in very, very, very low traffic areas, because all of these options can happen, and it does take a little bit of time to become familiar with the steering wheel and what's going to be best for us. And the biggest thing, we need to be smooth. So that's why hand over hand or push pull is practice in a parking lot, and it gets us very comfortable with what we do before we get out on the open road where we involve other cars. And we want to make any steering corrections smoothly. You can see here this car is pointed at, the red car is pointed at potentially oncoming traffic. We realize, oh no, we're coming too close to another car. So instead of quickly and abruptly turning the steering wheel, we want to take nice, slow hand over hand turns and get ourselves positioned correctly. And again, these are adverse moves and different things we'll talk about as you learn how to drive behind the wheel, starting with parking lot practice and then moving on to lower traffic areas. And then, of course, as we increase our skill set, moving into higher traffic areas. So these are all just introduction areas and something to be practiced as you work further in your driver training. Now I'm going to ask that you give me just a moment. I have to jump quite a few slides as it's an activity setup that does not, again, work very well as they haven't defined the details into how to update this and make it load correctly. So I have to jump quite a few PowerPoints here a second, and I'm working on that jump as I'm talking to you. And then in a moment, I'm going to push on the next PowerPoint slide, and we'll give it just a second to load. All right, so as I discussed here, now we're going to work on positioning your feet. And I have a question for you. True or false, your right foot should operate the accelerator and your left foot should operate the brake pedal. And the answer to that is a large false. We want our right foot to use the accelerator. And we're going to show here, the right foot is going to be on the accelerator. Here we can show our right foot is placed. Here their foot is a little bit low, relying on the toes just a little bit more. We'd want to slide that foot up and use the ball of the foot, but that's something to discuss again when we start out behind the wheel. We also want to use our right foot for the brake pedal. And you can see the foot is positioned correctly on the brake pedal and has actually just pivoted from accelerator to brake. So the heel remains stationary or in place down here, and the toes or the ball of the foot move from the right accelerator to the brake. And again, this is something to practice when you start working behind the wheel. This here, as that's highlighting, is called a dead pedal, and this is a location for the left foot to rest. When we are driving, our right foot is going to do all the work, and our left foot essentially, well, it can be lazy, I guess, would be a simple term for it. So we can set it next to what's called the dead pedal and use this space to keep the left foot safely out of the control area so the right foot can do its work. And here you can see that left foot is sitting on the dead pedal area and allows you to sit comfortably in your seat in good controlled position. We always want to make sure that our vehicle is clean. And you can see here, this is a huge problem. We have a shoe under our brake pedal, which means our brake pedal will not be able to depress and allow us to stop or slow. So we always want to make sure that debris and extra stuff is out of the way. Here is just a little kind of story and a sad little story. It's that a driver hits a cyclist when a driver's ill-fitting shoe got stuck behind the pedal. Now, ill-fitting shoe means they didn't have their correct shoe size on, and so the shoe accidentally got stuck on the pedal and it wasn't allowing it to move as it should. And here, why is it important not to hit the wrong pedal? So when we start to practice, again, we're going to practice in a parking lot to get familiar with what does the brake pedal do? What does the accelerator do? And some people accidentally push a wrong pedal. So they might need to brake and they're accidentally pushing the accelerator. So again, this is where practice before going on the road is very important. And we'll discuss that yeah, in every unit we do. And as we get closer to working on getting and going behind the wheel, we'll discuss again how we can increase our safety and make sure that we're using the accelerator when that's important and the brake pedal when that's important. And here we're going to look at a little short video. All right, so that video talked about the importance of the correct shoe wear when you're driving. And now we're going to look into accelerating the vehicle. So here we want to prepare the vehicle. We want to press the brake pedal. Here you can see the picture of us pressing the brake pedal. We want to ensure the car is in park and get ready to shift to drive when we're getting ready to move. And then if we do turn on our parking brake, we want to release the parking brake. Next, we want to look at checks and communication before we move the vehicle out of the parked position. We want to use our turn signal, and we'll talk about that a little more in just a little bit. We want to check our rearview mirror and make sure that nobody is interfering with our opportunity to move onto the roadway. And then we want to check our blind spot to make sure, once again, that nobody's there. And again, all of these checks will be explained in a little bit. Then when we're ready to move out, we're going to lift our foot slightly off the brake pedal. We're going to move to our accelerator and accelerate and begin to look safely down the road to start our journey of driving. We want to control our speed by resting our right foot against the accelerator and develop a sensitivity for each vehicle you drive. So some individuals might drive more than one vehicle as they go down the road, and so it's going to handle a little differently. And this can be discussed as we move in further chapters on learning to drive multiple vehicles. And so this slide talks a little bit about that difference in each vehicle. So we'll move on and talk about that information as we get closer to actual driving behind the wheel. There are different types of acceleration that move our car along. Idling acceleration is something that happens when you lift your foot off the brake pedal. You'll notice as you release your foot off the brake that your car will move gently and slowly on its own before you've even pushed on the accelerator. And that's okay. That's idle acceleration, and it will help us in parking, maybe help us move forward when we need to move up to a stop line, or just gently move around a parking lot. Light acceleration is to maintain slow forward motion or to allow the speed to increase gradually. So when we get ready to drive the car, we're not going to push that accelerator very hard. We're going to lightly accelerate so that we can get ourselves into position and move down the road safely. As we move to different areas of the roadway, we're going to have to increase our speed, go a little faster, if you will. So we're going to increase our pressure on the pedal, and you can see the foot is down just a little bit lower here. And that's going to have our speedometer increase and the speed of our car increase. Now, if we need to increase our speed quickly, we're going to use thrust acceleration. And you can see here the foot is pushed down farther on the accelerator, and they're going faster. And again, this is something that will be learned and used as you guys get out, or excuse me, as you get out behind the wheel and work to begin your independence in driving. Yeah, we're going to move forward. I apologize. The slides didn't move as quickly as my discussion. Next, we want to talk about braking and deceleration. Why might you have to execute an emergency braking maneuver or slam on the brakes? Well, if we fail to see a vehicle stopping ahead of us, another hazard comes out in front of us, an animal starts to run across the road, something falls off a vehicle in front, or you missed seeing something important in a traffic scene. Now, hopefully, we're looking ahead and everything works so we don't need to use emergent braking, but we want to prepare for it if it should happen, as occasionally we need to use those brakes with quick maneuvers. Moving along, we're going to talk about decelerating, and this is what happens when you press a vehicle's brake pedal. So as we talked about in the slides just a moment ago, we talked about accelerating or going faster. Of course, we know that when we go faster, we eventually will have to slow down. So decelerating is when we begin to push that brake pedal. So now we have pivoted our foot from the accelerator to the brake, and we're working on slowing down. When we do this, it allows the vehicle to increase its grip to the road and begins to slow. The braking should be precise, controlled, and smooth. This, of course, takes practice just like acceleration. And again, this is a practice point. So you want to stabilize the foot. You can see here that the person is in the process of moving from accelerator to brake. The heel remains stationary on the floor, and it's what we call pivot. So kind of like a windshield wiper. So it would be here on the accelerator and pivot over to the brake. And here we'll watch a short video. Okay. And so again, we're going to just kind of review by PowerPoint. Um, this one here is an activity that maybe we'll add at the end of our units to do by putting a stress ball or a balloon under your foot as you're sitting on a chair and kind of feeling that pressure. So Maybe while you're sitting here doing these videos, if you happen to have a basketball or a soccer ball, I ask that maybe you get up and go get that for a moment. And I have you put it under your foot. And as you're sitting, looking through these PowerPoints and listening to me discuss them, you hold your foot on that basketball and just kind of hold steady pressure just to keep your foot on it without pushing and popping the ball out from under your foot. And you're kind of gonna kind of see what that feels like. And it's much similar to holding an accelerator and giving it nice even pressure. So again, maybe at the end of this unit, I will show a video of myself pushing on a ball so you can see what that looks like when you're sitting seated. And it'll show kind of how to have that good control of holding your foot for a brake pedal. We're going to move forward here on practicing your braking. Um, what you can do to practice braking skills is maybe in a parking lot, if parents feel comfortable, or in the driveway, they could sit next to you and you could let the car roll down the road or roll down the driveway, excuse me, and push the brake pedal. Now, of course, if parents aren't comfortable with you getting behind the wheel just yet, when I show that video of my foot on the ball, this can be the same thing. And then when we get our temporary instructional permit, we can work a little more on practicing these maneuvers of going down the driveway and pressing the brake pedal. But again, that's up to the individual who's working and training with you. If they want you to go down the driveway and see what it takes to stop the car, it'd be a good activity to do. Now here, how should you signal that you are slowing to reduce the risk from being struck behind? Now, this slide is discussing potentially an emergent situation when you get out driving that maybe you need to tell somebody quickly that you need to brake quickly. So of course, maybe this will be in future drives, but they're saying to tap 6. So what they're saying is to kind of tap pushing your brake pedal 6 times, and that essentially makes your brake lights, or as the next slide shows here, is showing how you tap 6 times. It's showing that your brake lights are coming on, kind of like hazards. And this may help individuals behind you to see that you are stopping abruptly. Now, again, this is an evasive maneuver to learn and to work with when you get behind the wheels. So right now, this is just basic information that maybe you'll return back to. These are called hand signals. Now, hopefully you're not ever going out without your turn signals working, but there's times and our vehicles do malfunction and we're going down the road and we need to get back home. So this is showing our hand signal for stopping. This is telling individuals that we need to stop and we don't have any lights that are working. And so we could resort to hand signals. Now, of course, this is something that you would use on a bicycle as well. So maybe you already know this is a universal sign for stop. Here we're going to talk about total stopping distance. So it takes a little bit of work when we are preparing to stop, to work through the stop, and then to actually stop. So this is why when we're going down the road, we always want to be alert and aware of our surroundings. We want to be looking 12 to 15 seconds ahead in the city and 20 to 30 seconds ahead in the rural, because it does take a little bit of time for our car to respond. So here we can see our driver is way back here and they see something way up here is a problem in the road. So they can see that maybe this car is in an accident or maybe it's stopped. So way back here, we see the car. Right here, we start by pushing our brake pedal, and it could take all this distance to get us stopped for the emergent event. So this is why we want to look ahead and prepare so we can stop before the situation becomes an accident. ABS, that's the anti-lock brake system. We're going to kind of jump through this really quickly as this is a mechanical function of the car that can be introduced when you're driving behind the wheel. But essentially, it's a version that we just push our brake pedal and hold, and electronics will help the car stop if we need to stop an emergent event, such as maybe sliding on slippery snow or coming into something, maybe a hazard coming out. So again, this is something to understand and know that anti-lock brakes exist in your vehicle. However, something to work on in future units as we get more behind the wheel and actually practice our driving skills. Here is just another picture that anti-lock brakes will allow us to still steer our car. In older vehicles, when we stomped on our brakes, our wheels tend to lock up. And one good feature about anti-lock brakes is they allow us to steer. So also while we're braking, if we need to use an evasive maneuver with steering, we can still allow to do that. And again, this is something to talk about when you get your behind the wheel practice working. Next, we're going to look at backing. Many crashes occur while while drivers are backing. It seems to be the more dangerous time when maneuvering a vehicle. So we want to be more aware. So we're going to look at this next video coming up to introduce backing. Okay, that was a very good video to show us how to start backing. And you can see here, this is talking now, is there any spaces we should try to avoid backing into? So we saw that if we make gentle, controlled movements and do it nice and slowly, we could do it safely. However, there's times when the traffic conditions might not be so safe. We don't want to back into a busy street because it takes longer. We don't want to back onto a highway. We don't want to back where there's a pedestrian walkway if we can help it, or maybe other situations. And this is all because backing takes a little bit of time and you're looking left and right and you're taking a little more time to see. So maybe your vision is a little obscured. And so if we can help it, we want to try not to back into areas that are increased risk. Now, it may need to happen. You may have to do it. So of course, we just make sure we do it slowly. We're looking everywhere and we're taking our time. So what should you do to prepare to back up? As the video said, we want to start by walking around the vehicle and make sure there's nothing around it so that we're safe when we do move. When we enter in the vehicle, again, we want to avoid backing into busy areas unless we have to. We want to check all areas of our blind spots, make sure it's safe when we're moving, and keep our foot firmly on the brake pedal while shifting into reverse and still hovering over that brake pedal as we move backwards. We're going to search through the windows and mirrors the entire time. One, as we begin to start backing, and two, as we're backing. We don't ever want to stop looking behind us while we're in reverse. Again, as the video said, we want to make sure we're backing slowly, so that allows us to time to do the search and scans, make sure we're safe, make sure the area we go is appropriate. And again, precision, not speed. So taking our time, doing it slowly, looking and maneuvering it with nice small turns is going to help us to do it safely. Then as we get back totally, we want to stop completely. We'll put it in drive and we'll be allowed to move forward at that time. Here, this is showing what if I mess up while we're backing. It's okay. Not sure why they have this kind of blow up person behind them. This is actually just a blow up doll here. It's kind of a weird thing. But if we make a mistake while we're backing is what they're showing, and we see a hazard here, press your brakes, stop, wait for the hazard, or maybe put it in park and get out and move the hazard, and then begin again. But backing can be stopped at any point in time and allow you to readjust, reassess, and continue on. So don't be afraid to stop if you need to. Again, they talked about how to hold your hand. So we're going to hold our hand at the 12 o'clock position, and then put our other hand on the back seat of the passenger side. If we're backing to the right, we're going to steer to the right. We're backing to the left, we're going to steer to the left. So it seems kind of weird that when we're in reverse, sometimes we think we need to steer in a different position, and actually we don't. The way we want the vehicle to go is the way we turn the steering wheel. Newer cars from 2012 and on have backup cameras. Those can help us see individuals behind us. But please, 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 as you're backing, do not rely on the camera alone. It allows us to have huge blind spots around the car beyond just seeing out the back in a tiny, small area. So again, we want to resort to backing using our eyes to see, looking out windows, looking out mirrors, and then increase our safety. Moving on, we're going to stop and secure the vehicle. And so we're going to look at another video here and see what stopping and securing the vehicle looks like. All right, so that shows us how we're going to stop and park the vehicle. And we'll talk just a little more. So steps to secure your vehicle. First, come to a complete stop. 2, keep your foot on the brake pedal and set the parking brake if it's necessary. Shift the gear into park. Turn your lights off and close your windows to make sure the car is secure. We're going to then turn off the ignition, remove our seatbelt, check for traffic as we get out for safety, check the rear seat, make sure we've gotten everything out of the vehicle if we need to remove items, exit the vehicle, take your keys, and lock your doors. And this is just another picture. We always want to make sure it's in park. That's a safety feature to make sure we're safe. And here they're checking the rear of the vehicle. Looking as they get out, as you can see, the bicyclist here is like, oh my goodness, they're opening their car door. So we want to make sure our area is safe before we open our doors to get out, so that we don't crash the bicyclist or other things. And make sure that we look behind again. This is called the Dutch reach technique. It involves a driver or passenger looking carefully. So again, it's just making sure you clear your car as you leave. Okay, now as we get ready to open the door, as we talked in the video, we do want to turn our body to look again. Grab the handle as we get ready to open the door just a bit, lean outward for a better view. And then we can make sure that we keep the bicyclist safe or any other hazard safe by holding our door shut for just a moment. All right, I apologize for the momentary delay. I had an issue with my computer a second. So I'm back. This I'm going to just quickly go over for adjusting to different vehicles. Likely for you, you may start out and stay in the same vehicle for a little bit. However, if mom or dad or individuals you work with have one or two different cars, you might get into a different vehicle. And as I've said, in these units, each vehicle has different controls and different setups and how they do things. But for the most part, cars maneuver all the same. So you will have an accelerator, you'll have a brake, you'll have a gear selector or a shifter and an instrument panel. However, they may just look a little different. So each time you get into a different car, you're going to make sure that it's positioned and set for you, and then just take a minute to get familiar with the different ways that it works and feels. And this video or this picture here is showing all the different vehicles. So this is an SUV. This is what's called a sedan. Here's a pickup truck. So you have many different sizes, shapes, and different modalities of vehicle here. Gonna move down. All right. So big thing is, as we're going through this unit here, is you just want to be smooth at everything. You want to practice. As we go along in this, if the individual who's working with you behind the wheel is comfortable with you doing things in your driveway, maybe you could figure out after this unit how to gently push the accelerator and gently push the brake to get stopped. If not, I am going to add a supplemental video of myself pushing on a basketball or a soccer ball to see what that looks like as a practice piece as you gain what's called muscle memory in pushing on an accelerator or a brake. And if you'll give me just a few moments, there's a few more slides I want to check out here before we end this unit. I apologize, my computer is fighting me just a little bit here today. And we're going to look at this one. So this is can be a practice quiz that I think we'll kind of skip through for now. And we'll talk about in later units if we are interested to do that. But I think I'm going to leave on this slide here as the unit is coming to an end. and we have an activity that I don't want to work through. So we will come up to right here with our end chapter. Now, as you're working through this, again, we are on chapter 4, and we will have information in the email that was sent on reading with the book that you potentially obtained, a few more questions that I will have you answer, and how to turn in questions that I have asked along the way in this unit. Along with that, we will also add the supplemental video of me pushing on a basketball or a soccer ball. So at this time, this concludes Unit 4, and we will be in touch soon for the next unit.